I just read a book that'll just absolutely blow your mind. It's written by a congressman from Virginia. He's actually from up in Philadelphia initially, I think, in New Jersey. But anyhow, it's called Prisoner of Conscience. Frank Wolf, one of the great fighters for freedom around the world. And here at home, most Americans just take your religious freedom for granted. But in some parts of the world, human rights abuses and religious persecution are all too common. John Jessup introduces us to that one extraordinary member of Congress who's been fighting for decades to change what's happening.
From an orphanage in Afghanistan to refugee camps in Sudan, Virginia Congressman Frank Wolf has traveled the world fighting for human rights. Wolf says his dream of serving in Congress goes back to childhood. He ran on local transportation issues, but soon discovered his real cause was global. After witnessing Ethiopia's famine in the mid-'80s and seeing results of Ceausescu's repressive Romanian regime, Wolf became a leading voice on human rights. He credits a strong religious conviction for helping him to speak against wrong. His work gained respect and partnership from across the political aisle, as well as influencing policy from the Reagan administration to the Clinton White House. In his new book, Prisoner of Conscience, Wolf retraces his travels to some of the most dangerous places in the world, sharing how he was moved by his Christian faith and challenged to act using his influence in the United States Congress. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Well, a rare man in Congress, Frank Wolf. He's joining us now from Washington. Frank, so good to have you with us. It's a terrific book.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you. I want to get some of that cereal, too, Pat.
Well, I want you to live to be 100. We need you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, listen, you've been in these hot spots. You were over in Romania during the height of Ceausescu, and was your life in jeopardy at the time?
No, it never was. Actually, one of your camera crews was there and filmed a lot of that. And but no, Pat, I never felt. I was with Congressman Tony Hall and Congressman Chris Smith, and I think we were fine.
Well, where's the worst problem right now? You've had some things to say about slave labor in China. Is it still as bad as you portrayed it?
I think there are three places. One is Sudan, just above the southern Sudanese border up in Kidigli. They're now killing Africans. They're going door to door. There have been ethnic cleansing. They're all Christians, and it's done by the Bashir government out of Khartoum. I think that may be the worst, and also in Darfur. Secondly, we see in Egypt the Coptic Christians are having a very tough time, and we've given the Egyptian government over $50 billion, and yet the Copts live in fear. And I think the third place, in China today, Catholic bishops are under house arrest. Protestant pastors are being rounded up. They're plundered to bed. And at the same time, they're spying on us, taking all of our secrets, economic secrets, and yet we are borrowing so much money. I think the three top would be Sudan, Egypt, and also China.
Why can't we do some of those? Janjaweed there in Darfur were just going in and just wreaking havoc with those poor people, destroying their livelihood, burning their houses, and killing them. Why can't we stop that?
The UN has been very weak. Kofi Annan has been very weak. The current head of the UN has been very weak. We say never again with regard to Holocaust, and yet the genocide is taking place today in Darfur at a lower grade, because they've destroyed most of the villages. But you have Antonov bombers that bomb, and you have Soviet-Hind helicopters and the Janjaweed that you mentioned. But for some reason, the world just doesn't focus on it. Here you have Bashir, indicted war criminal, is able to travel around the world. He went to China. This past week, he went to Malawi. Yet when we were trying to get Milosevic and Radic and Kadar, we went after them. But yet for some reason, maybe it's because it's taking place in Africa, the world just doesn't seem to focus or to care.
What do you think? The president just sent in troops into Uganda. That Coney and that Lord's Resistance Army has been wreaking havoc for, well, it's 20 years or so. Was that a smart move on the president's part?
Well, your report was very good. One, I think the president should have notified the Congress. I think, personally, the Joint Chiefs should have called the leadership, House and Senate, and Armed Service Committee to tell them what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. They're not going to be in combat. But having said that, the notification, I think, to put some people in to help the Ugandan army, to help the Southern Sudanese army, and also to help the people in the Congo, because as your report had, the child soldiers, they're cutting off nose, ears. some of the stories are just atrocities going on, and they're threatening the Ugandan government, they're threatening the Southern Sudanese government. So I think what the president did was appropriate as advisories, but not to be actual in combat. But I think he should have first notified the leadership in the House and the Senate, and I think he should have really told the American people, this is not combat, this is just to assist the Ugandan military, the Southern Sudanese military, to round up Kony, who is a very bad person. I mean, there's so many child soldiers in that area, it's terrible.
What do we do? You've got the Chinese raping Tibet, and you have human trafficking on a major scale. You've done an inquiry into that. That, to me, is shocking. 1 million or more women being trafficked, or children being trafficked every year.
Well, I think the answer, Pat, in some respects, one, I think the church ought to be speaking out on it. But two, when President Reagan was president, you know, Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire. He said, tear down the wall. He spoke out on these issues. President Reagan said that the words in the Constitution were a covenant, not only with the people in Philadelphia in 1787, but with the entire world. And Reagan just had that ability to sort of crystallize. President Reagan was the one when we passed a bill to take away MFN, and again, your camera crew was there that first time with this. Reagan just took it away, just like that. He understood freedom. And if you've been watching these presidential debates, and I heard your comment earlier, no questions are coming from the media. What about human rights? What about religious freedom? What about the Coptic Christians who live in fear? What about the fact that Tibet has been plundered? What about the Nobel Prize winner 2010, Xiaobo, is in jail? What about what's taking place in Sudan? And I think we've failed the leadership test at the presidential level, and we just don't have a president like Ronald Reagan. And with the death of Henry Hyde and Tom Lantos, the voices for speaking out have really been silenced to a certain extent. But I would hope that during the presidential campaign, certainly the candidates on my side, the Republican candidates, would advocate, speak out the way that Sam Brownback did, if you recall, when Sam Brownback, now the governor of Kansas, he talked a lot about these issues when he was running for president. And I think the leadership at the top can make a tremendous difference. And lastly, I think the church in the West has to advocate. As you know, there are many passages in the Bible to advocate for the oppressed. Ecclesiastes 4:1, many other passages. But the church, I think, has to begin to speak out much more.
Well, Frank, I appreciate the way you reach across the aisle with Tony Hall, a Democrat, and others, and work together. Prisoner of Conscience. I hope this book does well. Is it available where you can buy it?
It's on Amazon.com, and I'm not sure other places where it's available.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, and again, I want to get that cereal recipe. I really do.
Well, our staff will get it for you. I want you to live to be 100. That's the 100-year-old recipe.
Thank you very much.
All right, Frank. Well, Congressman from Virginia, tremendous man. Prisoner of Conscience is available on Amazon, at least, and it's an incredible story of bravery and, you know, things that this man has accomplished. It's wonderful.